They did not die of war, they simply ran out of stories. Just let the weight of those words sink in for a second. As the lore keeper, kneeling in the ash at the very end of everything, this was the profound, devastating realization I had to witness firsthand. You see, our gods weren't defeated by blades or some epic cosmic battle. No, they faded from a simple, terrifying lack of belief. Welcome to the end of the world.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a deeply dark, almost graphic novel-style tragedy called The Architect of Myths and the Divine Void. To truly get a grip on what happened, I'm going to guide you through this from my own perspective, sharing exactly what I saw from the ash. We're going to break down the exact mechanics of a mythological collapse and look at how one chilling figure used the death of the divine to just butcher reality to his own liking. Let's get right into it. Act 1. The Crumbling Temple.
So, to really understand this event, I need to frame the narrative right from where I stood. Imagine looking up at this heavy, soot-stained sky, the air just incredibly thick with the smell of absolute decay. A massive, rusted iron gate separated my rotting truth from what would become a vital rebellion. I was literally kneeling in the ash right outside that gate, desperately trying to carve the names of our dying deities into these scorched scrolls. I was terrified, right? Frantically trying to preserve our history. And while I was there, scraping at the dirt, he arrived, the Shadow Bard.
And this, right here, perfectly illustrates the agonizing contrast between us. I was clinging to the past, trapped trying to record the rotting truth of fallen powers. But the Bard? His was a vital rebellion. Instead of weeping like I was, he reached into his cloak and pulled out the key of abandoned prayer. Now this was a jagged artifact forged literally from the cold silence of unheard, forgotten divine pleas. With it, he didn't struggle. He just slipped through the cracked doors of the sanctuary as effortlessly as a secret.
Act 2. The Scavenger's Overture.
Okay, following the Bard inside, we see the divine throne literally turning to dust before his eyes. And what he uncovers at the center of the temple is just chilling. He doesn't find holy scripture or some profound divine guidance. No, he discovers a mystical note containing the raw essence of every fallen divine empire. Notice his cold ambition here. The Bard treats the tragic collapse of these entire empires not with an ounce of reverence, but purely as raw material. This note becomes the literal core of his dark overture.
Just look at the clinical precision of a butcher here. The Bard isn't just playing a song, he is crafting his instrument using the literal remnants of dead rulers. It's an insane process. First, he reads the note of fallen empires. Second, he restrings his viol with the gut of a traitor. And finally, he tunes the pegs to the dying breaths of forgotten kings that are still echoing in the hollow halls. It's this incredibly cold, calculated preparation for what comes next.
Act 3. The Suffocating Gray Mist.
As he strikes that very first chord on his gruesome instrument, we witness a horrific shift. The divine truth we once knew doesn't appear as a radiant light anymore. Instead, it dissolves into the mist of the uncanny valley, which is this thick, suffocating gray vapor resulting from the fading power of dying gods. But here's the crucial point. This mist isn't just a shroud of death. To the Bard, it's a vast inkwell. It's the absolute perfect raw medium to begin his rewriting of the void.
By dipping his bow into this gray vapor, the Bard actually weaves the divine collapse into a masterpiece of grief. He transforms the memory of the gods into a recurring nightmare. He's literally capturing the leaking power of the dying gods to create propaganda designed specifically to summon fear and control whatever survivors remain. It's absolutely ruthless.
Which brings us to the tragedy happening outside the gates. My authentic history, the scorched records, and the true memory of the gods are completely burned and forgotten. Why? Because the Bard takes that gray mist and folds it into vibrant, lying colors. He completely replaces divine truth with fabricated stories and narrative toxins. He builds a brand new, structured reality just to fill that massive spiritual vacuum.
Act 4. Architect of the Void.
We are now in the aftermath, examining the Bard's internal motivation as the final echo of his song dies out. The true genius of his malice is that he bypasses the why of the world's destruction entirely and focuses solely on the how of its reimagining. Track this chilling psychological evolution with me. He begins as a mere scavenger of misery, using the twilight as his raw material.
Through his overture, he evolves into the master of the narrative. And finally, by the conclusion of The Twilight, in a world where the old gods are now entirely replaced by his fabricated story, he stands alone as the sole remaining god.
It all comes down to this one profound truth. The world did not end because the light failed, but because of the story he told to justify the dark. The massive takeaway you must grasp here is the terrifying real-world power of propaganda. The Bard proved that the world doesn't end when the gods die. It ends when the story told to replace them becomes the only remaining truth. Reality at the end of the day is ultimately dictated by whoever tells the most compelling story.
And so, I leave you with this haunting final question to ponder. If the truth is forgotten, does the story that justifies the dark become the only light? As I, the lore-keeper, watched the Bard walk alone into the ash of a world he now completely controlled through the narrative of the Void, I had to accept my absolute failure. The rotting truth was gone forever. I urge you to think deeply about the stories you accept as your reality. Thank you for walking through this dark myth with me today.